I'm Piper, this is my dad, and today we're here with Reverend Dan Wilson.
How's it going, Reverend?
It is going excellent. How are you?
Man, we are better than we deserve, brother. Better than we deserve. We're just, living that quarantine life. You're not far from us. We're right down the road in Ringgold. You're up in Chattanooga. And so I imagine life is very similar. Doing a lot of content creation and that kind of stuff. Taking the opportunity while we're shut in to, expose Piper to some good music, some good wrestling, some good horror, and all that. Those kinds of things that are really important. So you have most of our, I don't know if you've seen any of our episodes before, but most of our viewer audience comes from the National Wrestling Alliance family, and you have a very important history and connection to the NWA. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Absolutely, yeah. I worked with the NWA from 2000, the year 2000, up until whenever it was they split from, when there was a giant regime change and the Bruce Tharpe era came in, then most of the NWA promotions I worked with at the time stopped working with it. So I can't remember when that was, like 2011,
something like that, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, so I worked with the NWA for a long time. I promoted shows under the NWA banner. I got my start with the group, of course, with the NWA Wildside as the play-by-play announcer, Dan the Dragon Wilson. Mm-hmm. And then as that ended in 2005 and NWA Anarchy took its place, I joined the side of the Devils and became the Reverend Dan Wilson and led the Devil's Rejects through a reign of terror and chaos and bloodshed throughout the Southeast for many years, so much so that people ended up liking us. And then I got out of the performance aspect of wrestling and kind of went behind the scenes and promoted my own shows with NWA Chattanooga for a while, but also became a booker, and I was the booker for Anarchy Wrestling for many years, as well as many other smaller promotions. So, and I got to enjoy that part of it as well as coaching and training and developing talent. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, a lot of experience with the NWA.
You held the Anarchy title for a bit, didn't you? Or am I mistaken about that? I was thinking that you were the...
I did not.
You did not?
I was a wrestler, but I managed every champion that we had there at one point. At one point, I had all of the Rejects had every championship.
Right, yeah.
All at the same time.
Were you able to get Adam Pearce ever to come through the area? Was he able to come into your territory and defend the 10 pounds when he was on the throne?
He did an Anarchy, I believe, but we never could get him in NWA Chattanooga. We never could make it work out. I really did want to, but just the timing and circumstances, the time just didn't work, unfortunately.
Yeah. So as you are very well aware, this is a really exciting time for those of us who are enthusiastic about the National Wrestling Alliance. Like you, I'm from this area, and I grew up during the Crockett days, and just remember even before that with Georgia Championship Wrestling, how Tom Sawyer, Buzz Sawyer, Tommy Rich, all those guys, man, the Purple Haze that would come through and everything. So with that history and your connection, what are your thoughts on the direction that the NWA is headed right now? Are you pretty excited about it? You liking what you're seeing out there?
I do. I think it's nice to see it back in some capable hands. The brand, to me, has always really meant something. It's why I chose to promote under it, and it's why we were proud to be a part of it, especially in the Wildside days when we were getting a lot of attention and all the titles were coming into town and everything. Like, that was a really exciting time to be a part of the NWA. But the brand always meant something to me. It was a brand from my childhood, and I always felt like you could use it, and would it ever regain the past glories of Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair? Probably not, but it doesn't mean it's not a viable, respectable, recognizable brand name that you could use to produce quality wrestling. And so seeing that professionals like Corgan and the other people that are involved. Bill Behrens is back on board, which is a great move for them. I think it's great. I like the studio style presentation. That's really more my flavor of wrestling anyway. I think they're really doing a service and an honor to those initials.
Good deal. So we really don't come on here and talk a lot about wrestling. I'm just so intrigued by you. I've always really been enamored by the Devil's Rejects things and the Hate Junkies thing you did for a while with Strychnine and what was it, Danny Only, or I think was the other member of that. Great. Azrael, man, that was some of the best, most creative stuff. And like, to me, the NWA is always like, I mean, you've got some really outlandish stuff going on there, but you guys were just, man, y'all were savage, man. It was amazing. But there's always been this greater, in the NWA in particular, not to say that other promotions, I'm not downing anybody else, I'm just very enthusiastic about the NWA, but there's this sort of this theater bent and this horror bent that folks in my household are really attracted to. And you obviously had some influence. You run a horror podcast that we'll plug here in a little bit. But so I don't want to jump. I know you wanted to ask him this, but what is that connection? Where do you find the common threads there between like the horror genre and theater and pro wrestling?
Well, it's the eliciting of an emotional response and emotional manipulation, and comedy is honestly closely linked with those as well, because it just all draws on those primal instincts to get that investment and the reaction from the viewer. And there's just something about ripping somebody's head off in a horror movie and a blood squirting everywhere that, you know, no matter if you're disgusted by it or excited by it, it evokes a reaction. Wrestling is kind of the same way. It's that live, larger than life. You've got superheroes and horror movies and sports all kind of mixed together. And no, you can't kill anybody in pro wrestling, but you know, one of the things in the old school days that always attracted me to wrestling, and the hardcore legend himself, Gypsy Joe, was my great uncle, so I was certainly exposed to him. It was the blood. I loved the blood. You see the magazine covers, something kind of gone by the wayside now, but you see this bloody visage of Ric Flair and that bleach blonde hair with the blood dripping down, or Dusty Rhodes, and it's just captivating. Like you see it and you want to know more.
Right, right. What you had a question, Pip, that you wanted to ask him?
Oh yeah, what is your favorite horror movie or movies?
I'm so sorry,
Speak up.
Bad connection there. Would you mind reading it?
What is your favorite horror movie or movies?
Oh, what is my favorite horror movie or movies? That is always what I feel like is a trick question, because it's kind of like picking a favorite child. And after much debate, I came to a realization this year. You know, the cool answer is something like revolutionary and groundbreaking. And so I could say Halloween. Halloween is like one of my favorite movies ever. The 1978 original classic. I could say Night of the Living Dead, because it's one of the first movies that legitimately terrified me. I could say Nightmare on Elm Street, because it's one of the first horror movies I was ever allowed to stay up past my bedtime and watch. And I love all of those dearly, but honestly, the one movie that I can recite every line to, that I can watch no matter what time of day it is, no matter when, I'm always in the mood to see it, is House of a Thousand Corpses.
That's awesome. So you obviously you're wearing a John Carpenter shirt. There's a certain sacredness about Halloween in that series. What did you think of the Rob Zombie remakes?
I enjoyed them. The first one I enjoyed a lot, especially upon release, and it was everything that was advertised, right? It was not a slick remake. It was Rob Zombie's version of Halloween. So however you feel about that, that's what we got. So I think that's where it stands apart from a lot of the other reboots that came out around the same time, and I really enjoyed it. I liked what he explored with the making of a killer and the bad childhood and things like that really weren't in the first one. And of course, the argument is that, well, but you shouldn't explain the evil, and I get that, and that is why Michael Myers was originally so scary. But Rob Zombie himself said he could never out Carpenter, so why not go in a different direction? So I loved it. Second one took me a little bit longer to come around on, but over the years, the more and more I watch it, the more I do start to appreciate what he was going for there. It's a little bit different, and it's a little off the wall, but it really does complete the circle of the story he was trying to tell.
Right. And, you know, even with, like, Rob Zombie and Halloween, going back to pro wrestling, there's a lot, you will know this, our casual viewers aren't going to be aware, but there is a very deep connection between the Halloween remakes and pro wrestling, with the guy who played Michael Myers, also played the character Nitron, who was, you know, he was managing there for a while with a woman who co-managed Doom, and he was there at Starrcade 89 Future Shock outside the ring, but that's Michael Myers, which is really cool.
Tyler Mane.
Yeah, that's him. Have you met him before?
Might have crossed paths at a convention, but I've never met him.
I figured he might be someone that might end up on your podcast at some point, you know, as a guest. So,
yeah. Not one I've crossed paths with, but you know, I've enjoyed him and a lot of the stuff he's done. I thought he was great as Michael Myers. I thought he was great as Sabretooth in the X-Men movies.
Yeah, yeah. It's just neat how everything comes full circle eventually. It all comes back around to wrestling, man.
Oh, there's so much. I mentioned this on the podcast this week on our They Live episode, so there's a cheap plug for you.
Yeah.
Roddy Piper starring in They Live. John Carpenter himself was actually a big wrestling fan. He recruited Roddy Piper to come be in that movie by attending WrestleMania 3 as a fan when he was a kid and lived in Louisville, Kentucky. He was a photographer, or a correspondent reporter, rather, for Ring magazine. So he used to drive down to the National Fairgrounds and cover wrestling matches for Ring magazine back in the Goulas days. So that's a crazy connection to wrestling that I found.
That's neat. Have you now swinging over to like rock? Obviously, you love Rob Zombie and White Zombie. Is that your favorite act? Do you have other favorite bands besides him, or is there one that's more important to you than him?
Yeah, I mean, I love Rob. I'm just a big fan of his music altogether, but I wouldn't probably even rank him, you know, number one in my musical influences. That's a whole other thing. Like, it goes back to Black Sabbath, of course,
Sure.
number one. Like, everything comes from Black Sabbath, so without them, there's nothing. And then, you know, it kind of just expands from there into the 80s metal. Like, there's so many. Like, Metallica was probably my first, like, metal obsession as a kid. But even that spawned from a pretty casual interest in Guns N' Roses. Like, that, It was kind of the gateway drug. And then it just led me down the path where I was, like, discovering as much thrash as I could. Megadeth, Testament, Exodus. Like, all of that stuff I just eat up. And I like a lot of 70s hard rock. I'm a huge fan of Alice Cooper as well, and Zombie kind of goes along with that. I love those theatrical performances like Manson and Cooper and Zombie. I think that stuff is great as well. Kiss, obviously, I have Kiss tattooed on my arm. So I don't know if you can see that.
That's great, man.
Ace and Peter and Gene and Paul right there.
That's cool. So when Alice Cooper came to Chattanooga back at, I think, 2018, were you there at that show at Memorial?
I'm not at that show, but I saw him on that tour in Atlanta.
We were there. We went that night. So we try to introduce our daughters to good music very early, you know, so they grew up already being acclimatized to it. And my wife at the time was like 9 months pregnant. So we had our youngest daughter like 2 weeks later, but it was an amazing show, man. Amazing show. Alice Cooper.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, he can still go. He's so talented.
Yeah.
Well, so I like theater a lot. So do you have any like Broadway characters that you like, or like any Broadway show that you like?
You know, my wife is a huge fan of musicals, so I have been exposed to quite a bit, but there's not any that I'm like really partial to. I really appreciate the talent that it takes to do that, as far as, you know, the singing and dancing. Not necessarily my cup of tea. I like Repo the Genetic Opera. That's one of my favorite musicals. There was a Trey Parker and Matt Stone musical years ago, and Not Mormon, which I know is the newer thing that was
Right.
huge, but like, way back in the day that I did enjoy. You know, like I guess you could consider Disney movies musicals.
Sure.
Of course, big fans of those in our house, but I don't really have anything I could safely say is my favorite Broadway. I know what I'll say. I'll say Peter Pan, because I saw Peter Pan on Broadway when I was a child, and I won a contest to meet Kathy Rigby, who played
That's
Peter
cool,
Pan.
man. That's cool.
There you go.
Hey, did you see when you remember when they did the John Legend Jesus Christ Superstar a few years ago? That Alice Cooper played King Herod in that real recently. I don't know if you've got to see that.
I haven't seen it, but I did hear about Coop being involved.
Dude, man, it was cool because we venture into a lot of guilty pleasures when it comes to music. We like some pop and some country, bluegrass, but mostly metal. You know, I just appreciate that my daughters are really into that and trying to expose themselves. There's another question along those lines.
Does he have a guilty pleasure music?
Well, we'll hold that one for. So you have the Reverend has kids.
I have one kid, yes, a daughter.
So what's a day like in the household of the Reverend Dan Wilson with dad and daughter?
Well, I get up and I'm up before everybody at the crack of dawn because, you know, the early bird gets the worm. As much as in my younger days I would party all night and sleep until noon. That just don't happen now. I'm pushing 40 and got to get up and squeeze all the juice out of the day that you can, you know. My wife is a travel agent and an esthetician. So a lot of her work during the week is on the phone and via email, and then, you know, usually on the weekend she's seeing clients and stuff in her shop. For me, most all of the work I do is remote, so sheltering in place wasn't hard for me because I like to stay away from society generally. But I do love my concerts and my theme park and all of that, so I'd be excited to get back to that. But yeah, you know, I put in work till about 6 in the afternoon on various things, whether it be my day job or my wrestling. You know, well, in the booking days, it would be wrestling stuff, but of course, I don't really put time in on that anymore. So now it's more like podcast stuff where I'm researching movies every week. Yeah. And there's just mountains and mountains of research to be done, and editing the podcast and promoting, and plus whatever movie projects we've got in the pipeline or video projects, those, you know, come and go, but they're still omnipresent. There's always something brewing next, as you've seen the last
You want to answer guilty pleasure question?
Oh, yeah. Do you have a guilty pleasure music at all?
Guilty pleasure music? I don't believe in guilty pleasure, but I do. I think you like what you like, and if that's what you like, nobody should shame you for it. And if they do, well, I'd probably say some more colorful language, but there's a child here, so I'll just say, you just tell them to stick it. If they try to tell you that you should be shamed for liking what you like. But I do like a lot of different kinds of music that you probably wouldn't expect me to like, right? So, of course, I love metal. Of course, I love metal, classic hard rock, all that stuff. I love old school country. Love it. Like Cash, Waylon, all of that stuff. It's the best to me. I grew up on that stuff. That is like my chill, laid-back music, and I love that music. And I even love some of the more modern stuff, but I like the real outlaw stuff, like Hank 3 and Bob Wayne and people like that are just kind of really on the fringe. And then I like 80s pop, like synth pop, like Huey Lewis and the News, and, you know, big fans of like Phil Collins and Genesis and stuff like that. Just,
probably like The Cure, Depeche Mode, some of that stuff.
Yes, absolutely. The Colts.
Yeah, man.
It's not really favorite 80s rock, but, you know, kind of.
Yeah.
They were even some of the early alternative stuff, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, some of that stuff. So, yeah, my tastes are all over the board.
That's good. That just shows a well-rounded, educated, and eclectic personality. That's what we preach in the Stinson house, And just for our viewers, my agents and the Reverend Dan Wilson's agents have gotten together. He will be returning for a future episode where we're going to, I think, look at some Ozzy Osbourne. But today, we are going to look at one of the great songs ever. I don't know if it's one of the great videos. This is a pretty cool video, but it's by a really... we chose this one. And again, I was telling the Reverend earlier when we were talking, I was really torn between what to do, and I wanted to do the Ozzy song so bad, but I was like, you know what? I've got the Reverend on here, man. I want to do something that's kind of crossover, and so we picked a song that was the title or the theme song to Nightmare on Elm Street Dream Warriors, and it's by the band Dokken, who those of you who follow Power know that Dokken wrote Into the Fire, which was the theme song to season 1 of NWA Power. So we've got a kind of a horror and a rock connection here and an NWA connection. So we're going to walk out with this together. So Reverend, what I'll do is I'll just do a 1, 2, 3 countdown, and we'll hit play at the same time, and we'll be ready to go, brother. All right.
All right.
1, 2, 3, and go. Yep. That's a burn book. Building the house, man. And that's the, so you've never seen an Elm Street movie, but that is a model of the Elm Street house there.
Oh.
So, what was your favorite Elm Street movie?
Patricia Arquette there.
Yep.
Who starred in Nightmare on Elm Street 3.
Yeah. Now, do you have a favorite Elm Street film?
3 is up there, honestly. Yeah. Of course, the first is hard to top, right? Like, we did a whole season going over the career of Wes Craven. So I did some deep dives on the Elm Street stuff and watched them over and over. And I think the first will always hold up, but 3 is amazing. And then New Nightmare, I rank those as like the must-see versions.
Right. Man, Patricia is just so elegant, man.
She was great in this movie. It was a shame that they recast her because she wanted more money or something, but she did not come back for part 4, but the same character did.
What'd you say, Pip? Freddy Krueger, yeah. Does he give you the creeps, Freddy?
It's funny because really at this point, Freddy was kind of a comedy character. You know, he started off very menacing, but he became merchandised pretty quickly.
That's right.
And he was one of the hottest things in the country at this point.
He always have those little catchy, little funny, you spend half of the movie laughing, you know, half of it screaming.
Yeah, he would almost be like a Looney Tunes character with his one-liners and things.
Piper's just learning to ride a bicycle.
No.
We need to get the tricycle back out for you?
No, I just need a new bike.
It's hitting your knees.
Yeah.
So he's going to rescue this little girl from the Freddy's Bowery.
Right. So Piper has never seen the Nightmare movie before. We're going to wait until she's a little bit older to introduce her to that. But she knows enough because we talk about it enough. She knows that it's got some cultural significance about it.
Oh, yes. And they're not too bad. They're some of the first ones I saw as well. You know, they're nice introductory films for when you get to that age.
Basically, the concept is that you got this really bad man in the neighborhood. All the locals turn on him. You know, they basically exercise some vigilante justice and burn him alive. He comes back and haunts their dreams and kills them through their dreams. So. Yeah, Piper likes to draw a lot of connections between Phantom of the Opera and things that she sees. So, yeah, I would say he's got a Phantom face. Yeah. At least half of it. The Phantom.
Robert Englund, the guy who played him, also played the Phantom of the Opera in a remake of that movie. And there you see George Wendt shredding away on that skull guitar.
Dude, I love it, man. You play guitar?
I play a little bit. I wouldn't consider myself good. I sang in a metal band for years.
Did you?
A metal band called Over Destroyed.
Anything out there?
For NWA Wildside.
What is Dokken doing these days, man? Are they even a band anymore? Are they doing small clubs?
I believe they're still touring. I think there might be 2 versions dozens of them in some sort of dispute over the rights. I got to see them live a few years ago. It was mainly just Don and some other guys, but they were good. I mean, I had a good time.
Right. What you think about
One of the things I love about this video is like they cut in stuff from the movie of her like walking down the hall and being scared, but where Freddy would have been in the movie, they cut the band into the shot. So she's like reacting scared to talking.
Maybe in the 80s, you know, but today it's like it's a much the rock landscape. I think like Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie changed it quite a bit. So this would have been considered really hard back in the 80s, you know. And today it's, you know, not too bad.
Yeah, it's pretty tame compared to some of the harder. Who were those guys?
So did they get Robert Englund to do that just for this video? I mean, did he? Or is that something?
They did. They got him to do some stuff. Like, it wasn't a lot of stuff, as you can see. Like, most of that footage was in of him from the movie. But that part right there, the end where he wakes up from the dream, was filmed specifically for the video. Interesting, Into the Fire was also in that movie. It actually kicks the movie off. So you mentioned that as the new theme song for NWA. That's another Nightmare on Elm Street connection.
That's cool, man. Like I said, everything comes full circle all the time. I'm looking on I'm real fascinated by all of your art on the back of your wall. I see Chucky back there, and I see Fear Fest and some different things that you've got. That's pretty cool, man.
Oh yes, the office of One Good Scare Productions is adorned with all kinds of horror memorabilia. You can't see it, but this wall over here is full of autographs. I've got Joe Bob Briggs, PJ Souls, Bill Mosley, Angus Scrimm, Tom Atkins, Kane Hodder. That's like my horror wall of fame. And then behind me here, we've got just some art pieces mainly. Like the one with Chucky is from Universal's Halloween Horror Nights a couple years ago. I've got a They Live, a 3D poster here. Man. There's the Montage poster up there. That's a Fangoria print that came in as a centerfold of the rebooted Fangoria #1.
Now, does your wife share in the enthusiasm, or she just kind of tolerate it, or how's that work in the Reverend Dan Wilson household?
I'd say that varies depending on the day. She is a horror fan, and like a pretty big one. We go to Halloween Horror Nights. We went there on our honeymoon. Going on 10 years now, and we go every year, and we watch a lot of horror movies, but where I don't really have a limit for it, she kind of does. So she enjoys it, but there's there's a time where she's like, I've got to watch something else. Please turn on something funny or something that's not hard. Okay.
That's cool, man.
It's all about compromise, you know.
So tying it back in, coming up, if you, well, I don't want to make you pick between like your favorite kid, but do you have a piece, an autograph or something in your collection that's like the most prized piece, the most essential Reverend Dan Wilson piece that you own?
Right now, probably the Angus Scrimm one, because he's no longer with us, and I got to meet him and just have a great conversation and share a moment with him. He played the Tall Man in the Phantasm series, which are some of the greatest horror movies of their day. And I met him at a convention where there was hardly anyone there, so I got to sit there and chat with him for a good long time. I got to sit and chat with PJ Souls for so long at that convention that we were like buddies. So, that's the advantage. It sucks for the people who attend it, but that's the advantage of attending a lonely attended horror convention, is you at least get a lot of face time with the guests. Right. So I really spent a lot of time with Angus and just tell him, how much those movies meant to me and everything. And so I really do cherish that one. I've got some wrestling. I never really collected autographs when I was in the wrestling business. I know the outlook on that's kind of changed now, but at least in my era, it wasn't really looked kindly upon to go ask famous people that you worked with for autographs.
I want to mark out, yeah.
So Like, it wouldn't stop people from doing it, but I tried to have more integrity. But I did get an autograph of Lance Russell that a friend actually got me as a gift right before he passed, and so I really appreciate that. And then I got a Terry Funk autograph somewhere that another friend got for me.
That's cool, man. Piper, you have anything else for the Reverend? Well,
not really. Oh yeah, back to wrestling. Did you like wrestling as a kid at all?
I did. I loved wrestling as a kid. Like, it was like the one thing I wanted to do. So I was very fortunate. I really felt like I got to live my dream. I might not have been in WrestleMania main event, but man, I had a great time. I met a lot of cool people. I got to help develop some stars and, help with, like, of course, the AJ Styles connection will always be my biggest claim to fame. I came up with his phenomenal one nickname that he still uses, so it's crazy to turn on WrestleMania. But I kind of was in the main event of WrestleMania, if you think about it, because I turn on there and I see the phenomenal one wrestling The Undertaker, and I'm like, holy cow, it was a true honor. I grew up on NWA wrestling, of course, but I was a big WWF fan as well. It was already national by then. I was in my peak wrestling fan years in the late 80s, early 90s. That was when I was born in 1980. So I was like 8, 9, 10 in the late 80s. That's really when that stuff hits you.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Hey, Reverend Wilson, I know that you're very busy. You're a freaking cool man. You're someone I love. I feel like we could hang out, man, at some point and watch some horror, listen to some rock. And I'm pumped. I definitely want to get you back on here. I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you got things to do. But we appreciate all you've done for the horror industry, for the National Wrestling Alliance. And I would like to give this opportunity right now for you to plug your podcast so we can direct all of our viewers to your work and what you do to promote the genre of horror.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started One Good Scare Productions as my post-wrestling project. I just kind of hit a point in wrestling where I accomplished all I'd set out to do, and I didn't really see myself going any further unless I wanted to put in a vast amount of effort that I'd already really put in for the last 20 years. So I was like, okay, I'm kind of not getting any younger. I'd like to maybe try some other things on my bucket list. One of those things was always to make a horror movie. And so I started One Good Scare Productions as a vehicle for that. And of course, we anchored that with a podcast where I educate myself, but also the audience about the variety of history of horror movies. We've done seasons on many different topics. The podcast is called Seeking Human Victims. You can see from the banner behind me. We're on all the major podcast providers, iTunes, Spotify, etc. So you just type us in there, Seeking Human Victims. Okay. And each season we pick a topic and we just dig in. And I do the same type of research that I used to do as a wrestling announcer on these horror movies and just really try to educate myself about the entire process that went into making this movie. We really break it down with a fine-tooth comb. And so this season currently we're doing the John Carpenter Terror Timelines. We started at the beginning of John Carpenter's career, and I examined each and every horror movie that he released during that time. And so we've got 11 episodes this season. We didn't do some of the sci-fi movies. We might get around to that later. We did a Friday the 13th season where we went through that entire franchise. It was very popular. We did a Wes Craven Terror Timeline where we similarly went through his career. We did a slasher season. We did ABCs of horror season. So we've really been cranking out the content with just the podcast alone. But the filmmaking component was there to also have some additional content to add to that. Right. One Good Scare. So I made my first movie. It was a short called Sanctuary. It's over on our YouTube channel at One Good Scare Productions. OG Scare is the tag on YouTube. And we made that in 2018. And a pretty good response. We just released it for free online just to see.
And it's still accessible online?
So what?
People can still view it online for free?
Yes, it's still there.
Okay, sweet.
It is. And it's... I'm taking all the stuff I learned producing wrestling television and things like that and just kind of trying to apply it to creating horror content. And I've of course, studied a lot of independent stuff beyond just my own personal experience. But that's one of the reasons for the podcast is like gaining that knowledge and trying to see what these other directors did that made their movies work. That maybe I can adapt, maybe not, but I have a good time talking about it. We make it quite entertaining. My wife Annie is on the podcast panel. The great Muji, who's been a longtime friend and collaborator of mine, is on the podcast. And other people that I've worked with. Todd Thompson's a great comic book artist. Jason Griswold, who's a great musician. So we just have a nice panel. I do the research on the movies, but then we all sort of discuss my findings.
Right.
And developed a nice little following on social media. On Twitter, we're pushing at around 2,300 followers and always looking for more. So hit us up there at OG Scare. And Facebook at OG Scare, and our website is ogscareproductions.com. Our second short film, which was a film called I Gotta Rock, and it was a Christmas-themed horror film. It actually got into a film festival right before the pandemic hit, and of course the film festival was canceled. So I was super bummed. That was like one of my first goals on the filmmaking bucket list, was just get in a film festival. Yeah. We did that. So even if it didn't happen, we did it. I'll take it.
Well, I'm sure it's going to happen, man. At some point, things will approach something like normal again, and that film will make it on there. But I'm gonna send all my viewers there. We'll put some text on the final edit of this interview here, and we'll make sure we get our crew over there to you and to support what you're doing. It's very important work. So, Reverend Wilson, man, you're freaking cool. We love you, man. We're big fans, and I thank you so much for joining us on Piper's Notes.
With Piper and Rob as my dad.
Sounded weird, but yeah. So, thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate it, Reverend Wilson.